Was the previous $500 blacksmithing setup outside your financial comfort zone? Well, what could we do with a couple of hammers, an old pallet, and a hairdryer? Let's find out. I'm going to use a piece of tubing just to keep the hairdryer away from the fire. I don't want to melt the darn thing. And some bricks to kind of define everything, hold it all together, get the pipe up off the ground so it can enter more where the fire is going to be instead of right along the ground. It'd be worth experimenting a little bit, but this is just kind of what I saw in my head, so it's what I'm going to go for. It's not necessarily the best way to approach this. This is some kind of wet, sandy soil that I just happen to have back behind the shop, and I'm going to use that to line this and give my fire pot a little bit of shape. It would be nice to let this dry for a few days before I build a fire in it, but we're going to try it out one way or the other and see what happens. A little more of the wet, sandy soil to hold the pipe in place. Well, I think I might like to build this up and add a couple of bricks around that, help hold it just a little bit better. The bricks are all just old salvaged brick, not something I went out and bought. You could use rocks, you could build the whole thing out of dirt if you want, or dig it all down into the ground if you don't have anything else. Pretty easy to chop up a pallet with a circular saw. On the other hand, if you don't have a circular saw, I'm sure we can find another way to cut this up. Perhaps using our anvil, or the sledgehammer we will be using as an anvil, I should say. It's actually quite gratifying to break it up this way. I decided to add a little bit of a back to this so I can pile the wood just a little bit deeper and get a better bed of charcoal in here. Again, I don't have a firm plan, I'm just making this up as I go along. Now it's time to go ahead and light a fire. I'm going to use a propane torch because I have one handy in the shop. Newspaper and matches would be just fine. I just don't happen to have any newspaper in the shop. This really is quite remarkable. It makes a better fire than I thought it was going to. Let's just see if we can get a piece of iron hot and see if we can do some forging with it. Just have the sledgehammer sitting on the ground. Probably not the best way to set it up, but it's simple and affordable. So if you're just getting started, this may work for you. Boy, it cools down fast. It's not up at a high forging heat. It could be a lot hotter. Yeah, okay, let's see if we can anchor this sledgehammer down a little bit better by digging a little hole to put it in. Stand it up on the end so we've got the small face to work on. Now somebody's thinking right now that, oh, you shouldn't be striking a hammer with another hammer. Well, for one thing, that's not as big a problem as people make it out to be. But for this project, you're actually putting hot iron on the one hammer and striking the hot iron with the other hammer. If you're striking the two hammers together, you need to work on your aim a little bit. That shouldn't be an issue at all with this. But do wear your safety glasses, just in case. Yeah, that definitely makes a better anvil out of the thing. It's nice to have a little bit more solid. I think during this little project here, I spent almost as much time cutting up the pallet and tending fire as I did actually forging. The heats were really long and it burned up fuel really fast. Yeah, even buried in the ground, that thing's not as solid as I would like it to be. I think there's some better options, and we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end of the video. But this is working. It's working better than I thought it might. Not as well as I would like it to, but a lot better than I suspected it might. So, all in all, I'm pretty happy with the way this is going. If you're wondering, I'm just making a simple little fire poker. Nothing very special. I just wanted to do something to try this out, see if it got hot enough to forge, and see if we can use a sledgehammer as an anvil. So far, the answer is yes to both of those questions. A horn would be really nice, though. Okay, I've cooled this off. We're going to work on the other end, create a handle for our poker here. Definitely getting too cold to forge. I think it's time to go back to the fire and heat it up again. But first, more fuel. We're just going to double this over to make a little bit larger handle to hold on to. Nothing special. This is a very simple handle. Really good for little fire tools like this, tools used at the campfire and such. Not really something I do for household projects very often, but it is completely functional. That gives us a useful little fire poker for maintaining our forge fire, or using in a wood stove if you have one in the house. Not as good as working in a regular forge, but considering we're burning pallet wood in a hole in the ground, using a sledgehammer for an anvil, a 16-ounce claw hammer for the hammer, and a
cheap hairdryer, none of these things that I had to go out and buy. If you had to go buy these at a garage sale or a flea market, I'll bet you wouldn't have more than $20 in this whole setup. And a whole lot could be done to improve this. I think the first thing I do is find some way to elevate this so I don't have to get down on my hands and knees just to work the fire or work at the anvil. I think maybe a couple old 50-gallon drums with solid bottoms on them that you could stand up and build this on the drums, or maybe a stack of cinder blocks. Use your imagination, but I'm sure you can come up with something that isn't combustible and you're not going to burn and start a fire. Now, the sledgehammer is really a functional little anvil. If you could gouge out a hole in a stump that was the right height and set the end of this down in that and silicone it in heavily and maybe leave the eye exposed enough to get a strap through there to secure it, that would be a vastly better setup than sitting in the dirt. And that would have sped this whole process up considerably. So just those two things would make this much nicer. Something better for a blower would also make it nicer. Maybe the bouncy house blowers. I've heard a lot of people using those. And of course, better fuel. Converting wood to charcoal in the fire actually works if you start with the wood at the far end of the fire, and as it burns down into charcoal, bring it into the sweet spot wherever you find that it's hot enough closer to the air inlet. You're going to get better results than just forging in the wood directly. It takes a lot of energy to convert it to the charcoal. But you could also buy bagged lump charcoal. You could even burn coal or coke in this if that's what you have available. Lots of things you could do to improve this setup. But if this is the best you can do with your financial situation and your budget, you can start blacksmithing like this. I don't think you're going to make a living using this setup, but it's a way to start. It's a way to get the experience. But make sure it's someplace you can safely have an open fire, keep a few buckets of water around, maybe a fire extinguisher, and don't be that guy that shows up on the news because he burned his house down or started a forest fire trying to do a little bit of blacksmithing. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. I'd like to thank my Patreon supporters for supporting this channel financially, and thank each and every one of you for taking the time to watch the video. Hope you have time in your day to get out to your shop. Have fun, be safe, wear your safety glasses. We'll see you for the next one.